so many of you stayed. I wondered how this would work out. I really am. Tammy has been hard on me, in a good way, because at the end she says, well, you didn't come up with solutions. We don't have the language. We don't quite know how to go from, well, you're doing it wrong, but what does it mean to do it right? She wants me to have a pyramid of values or things, and it's perfectly good. My problem here is that I'm looking at this from the standpoint of a practitioner. I'm not looking at this stuff from the standpoint of an administrator, of a marketer, of somebody whose job is to promote the university. I remember when we first had that first symposium where that old man said that we were the most boring thing he'd ever heard. And I was trying to explain the precision of the economics, and another participant in that session who was from, I think, Missouri, said, oh, God, I can't say that stuff to legislators. That's just gobbledygook to them. I need different language. And so how do we bridge between what I say you should say versus you saying what you think you need to say? And I'm going to tell you, you've got to have a dialogue among yourself and with those icky people, those economists. I just got done doing a thing where we had all these people do these evaluations, and we took them through these series of steps, and then they fed their results into a bunch of us who work as economists, and then we wrote what we said were help for comments, and then we shipped it back to them, and then we asked them to evaluate the entire process, and the thing they rated the lowest were the helpful comments from the economists. So I understand where I am in this world. Okay, I don't think this is going to go quite as... What I want to do is show you, we have a lab rat here. We have the College of Human Sciences here, and they've generously allowed me to study their college, but it's not a big deal. It's just another little college in my university. Last year I did a little piece for liberal arts because, like all of our other colleges, all of a sudden somebody got panicky and wanted to know what's the economic impact of the liberal arts. Just prior to that, I did the veterinary college, and I have never met more overbearing people in my life, because when you get right down to it, the world revolves around veterinary health, and that's just the way it works out. So you saw how we did this probably before. I have to begin with some kind of declaration, some kind of enumeration of university spending. I need it either in some detail, or I need it in a lot of detail. If we're going to do this right, we have to begin with our university spending. I have to translate that into regional industrial output. That's a mechanical problem. That's an economist problem. Many don't do it properly, but that's something that has to happen. So we do that translating process. We create a declaration of the university's economic activity in the region of analysis for a time period of measurement. We have our multiplier through process. Either it's RIMS2 multipliers, or I put this information into an input-output model, either in-plan or of my own making, and I start cranking that stuff, and I get my total estimated economic effects. I get my footprint. I get my contribution. But what I do is I get this initial declaration of what's the worth of my university at this point in time. So that's my process. That's my process. And it's a little bit of we make it sound simple, and I also make it sound complicated, I guess, but it begs for an understanding of just exactly how your university is composed. What constitutes university spending? I'm going to put this up here. Oh, that's hard to read, and I'm sorry, I was in my black and white period at the time. That's instruction, 22%. This is academic support, 12%. Put them both together, I got a third of my university as education, directly. Of course, I've got other kinds of general support and maintenance and whatnot. My research and public service, another 24%. I'm just over half my university here. When we describe Iowa State University, we say we do education, we say we do research. I'm just a little over half. What constitutes my university? Well, of course, I've got the shared general support and maintenance. I got my power plant. I got my guys and women on the tractors and stuff like that. I do have scholarships, so we have transfers in that thing. We also have this creature, enterprises. My university is an enterprising activity. It makes money on its sports teams. Enterprises. It makes money on housing. We don't just have dorms at our universities. We have regular housing, apartments at our university. We have enterprises, yeah. Sorry, is this budget, is income or this is expenditures. So this is how it's sliced, how we, yeah. I don't pay a lot of attention to income. I don't. Income's important, but I pay attention to expenditures. So I've got a lot of my university is not what we're saying. Well, that's actually good because we're trying to make the case for education and research using a lot of dollars that aren't education and research. But it's all part of our university. Here's where all of my student living is. That's where my student dining is. This is where my coliseums and my arenas and my art and my plays. And all of that. It's in here. It's in here. So I've got a very complicated system here. Okay, so there's two ways to do a college in our university. The first way, and it's the way that I'm usually going to do it, is that I begin with a university-wide set of estimates. I estimate the economic impact of the university first. The reason I do that is because I need to have a general model that describes a university system. And even though College of Human Sciences doesn't run the enterprises, the College of Human Sciences does benefit from operations and maintenance and some of that shared stuff. They do get they are the recipients of the scholarships. I've got to have the university set measured first. So I can do it that way. The second way is called a bill of goods analysis, in which we get a line item categorization of the kinds of spending that the college makes in high detail. Not only do we get the dollar value, we also get the vendor's zip code, because I have to figure out whether the supplier was in or outside of my economy. And you can imagine how happy purchasing is when you ask them for that data set in March. And they laugh and laugh and laugh. And unless you have somebody like the provost telling them they have to give me that, they're going to laugh and laugh and laugh. So I don't do that very often. But if you want to do it really well, that's what you do. That's what you do. So we start out with a university. So I have in-plan. I have modified it so that I have the labor income and I have the employment for my university. I have the capital activity allocated properly. I have the big expenditures for energy and some of the other supply categories properly entered into the model. Just the big stuff. Just the big stuff. I remake a model. I have a good model. It's for the right area. So I start out and I have Iowa State University, and this is last year, has $1.157 billion worth of total expenditures. I figured out how much of that is payroll, wages, salaries, plus benefits. I figure out the full and part-time jobs. We don't measure full-time employment, full-time equivalency. A job is a job is a job. We measure jobs in a model. I want to know how much of that is student employment. Very important. It's a big chunk of our employment is student employment. And then I have other information down here. How many students do we have? 33,000. How many of those are off campus, meaning they live off campus? I want to know that because that's some more information I need to know, because I want to make sure I don't double count. I don't over-attribute some of the student activity to the economy. So we have that. I have the College of Human, look at this, 38, it's way small. It's only 3% of my university. But look down here, 13.5% of my students. So it raises a question. Anything weighted on the expenditure side, small. Weighted on the student side, it's high. we have trade-offs there. We have trade-offs when we're doing this. But I wanted to point that out. Same thing with the jobs, 3.3%, but they've got more of the labor, What we're going to start out with is this, though. I have to translate this into output. Output has to become the thing that starts to drive the modeling system. But I also have to do something else. Again, I have to specify my territory. My university truly believes it has statewide value. Its economic impact is statewide, all 99 counties, but it's not. It gets its labor. It gets 95, 96, 97% of all of its labor comes from just that triangle. We call that a Fox's box. Carl Fox had this theory of how economic regions were allocated. So see, it's in here. And it also is buying all, and by the way, this is Polk County where Des Moines is, the biggest economy in the state. It's buying the vast majority of its service and supply inputs from this region. This is where the labor that works at Iowa State University comes from. This is where the households that work at Iowa State University spend their incomes. That's where my model needs to be specified for. Not a statewide model. I'd have too high of multipliers. I'd be over-describing the value of it to the state. University-wide contributions. Okay, here's where I get these numbers, and people say, oh, I can't process. Let's work our way through this. I have direct effect. That's at the university level. Iowa State, we've already seen these numbers. Iowa State University had $1.56 billion worth of output. I'm just using the expenditure value. I normally would modify that, but I'm doing this for ease. To produce that output took 15,654 jobs, making this amount of labor income. So that's my direct activity. In producing this output, Iowa State University purchased this $268 million worth of supplies from the regional economy. To supply those supplies to Iowa State University required 1,902 jobs, making $91,625,000. When these workers at the university, these workers at the supplying sector took this labor income right there and converted it into household spending, they induced another round of spending in my regional economy of $452 million. To supply those goods and services to those households required another 3,893 jobs, making 160 million or so in labor income. We add all three of these together, all the way down, to get our total effects. Iowa State University, as a university, its total economic contribution, considering university spending, is 21,449 jobs, almost $890 million worth of labor income supported in that region. And then the big number that everybody wants is the almost 1.9. By the way, by the time an administrator gets this number, of course, it's $2 billion. Okay? We have an economic impact of $2 billion in the regional economy. Well, no, we don't. Actually, this is just technical. Value added is the same as GDP, and GDP is how we count the size of our economy. So actually, this is our GDP. But then you say, well, our economic contribution is $1.08 billion in GDP, but that's less than the direct. Oh, it's confusing. Let's go with the big number here. What really matters is this, right here. 21,500 jobs, $890 million worth of labor income. That's the value. Now we go to the next part. I have my students. I use the CES data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I adjust it for the difference in the cost of living in Iowa relative to the national average. And then I apply those factors, those spending categories, times my students. I control for the students that live on campus because I've already counted them. All of the students that live on campus are already up here. Plus, all of the students that were student employees, I've already picked up some of their activity as well. So I got to be careful not to double count. I have to be careful, but I'm going to do it initially. And I measure all of the categories that I expect my students to be spending. All of the things that they buy, pizza, beer, all the things that matter, gas, rent, insurance, clothing, all the stuff that normal people buy. And then I have a probability that they buy tattoos and piercings, all the things that matter, and tanning. Oh, don't forget the tanning. This time of year, we've got tanning. So I run that through the model, and I get the same thing. My students, now this isn't spending, my students in their direct spending in my regional economy support about $166 million worth of unique output in my economy. To produce that output, it was 1,300 jobs. Again, all of those stores required inputs, and then it supported some jobs. All of these job holders took their income and converted it into household spending, which induced more. And then that supported more jobs. We add it all up, and we get the total economic effect for my university. So I've got these values and these values, but I've got some double counting between them, so I can't quite add them all together here. I can't quite add them all together. So I take care of the double counting. Oh, I'll do this in a second, I think. Oh, I don't control for the double counting on here. What I'm going to do here now is go to the College of Human Sciences. So I've got this bigger model. I've got a template. I've got a format. I've got a framework. I've got a bunch of relationships and coefficients that I can use to try to then model what's the economic worth of the College of Human Sciences in my regional economy. I have this initial value of spending. I have a payroll value. Again, these things aren't fixed factors. This is 3.3%, payroll is 4.5, labor is 5.8. So I've got some variability and dynamics in my modeling system all the way through. I've got my employment, I've got my students, again, 13 and a half. So they're going to be a little bit lower in part on the economic impact side, but they're going to be a little bit higher, quite a bit higher, because they account for more of the student activity. Again, we're paying attention to this set of numbers for my College of Human Sciences. So this becomes my subset that I'm going to do my estimates from. Again, we get the very same kind of numbers here. I've got the initial spending of my college. Here's employment at the college. Here's the labor income at the college. We have the inputs that they require, the labor income required to produce those inputs. We have the household spending effects, almost 15 million. Again, the jobs associated with that. So I can sum these all up and say that even though the spending of the College of Human Sciences is 38 million, its gross economic impact, if we measure it on an output side, is about 62 million. It's a big number. I've got this many jobs supported in the regional economy, this much labor income, this much GDP or value added. I'll get back to this again. I didn't explain them before, but what is my multiplier? My multiplier is just this value divided by the total value divided by the direct. This means for every job in the College of Human Sciences, there's 26/100ths of a job in the rest of the economy. For every dollar of labor income that's paid up here in the College of Human Sciences, there's 29 cents worth of income supported in my regional economy. That's my multiplier. It's not 2.5, not 2.3, 1.29. When I go out in the countryside, everybody thinks they have a high multiplier. It depends on who. The farmers think they have a multiplier of 5. Retail people think they have a multiplier of 7. It's 1.18 or something like that. But anyway, it's it's hard to explain to them that they don't have the multiplier that they think. These are our multipliers. They're not that high, but they are there, and they're measurable, and we can do a good job. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry if I missed it, but how are you getting from column 3 to column 4?
3 to 4? What's value added? Okay. I shouldn't have even put it up here. Value added is one of the pieces that we get out. Let's look at the bottom. We're not going to look at the top. Labor income is all the wages, salaries, and benefits that are attached to any employee. You as university employees have a great amount of labor income in excess of your wages and salaries. Somebody who works at Hardee's does not. Okay, so we have that. Value added. Value added includes labor income. It also includes returns to investors, legitimate investors, as in dividends, interest, and rent, what we call passive income or unearned income. Labor income is earned income, the rest of that is unearned. And it includes indirect tax payments that are part of the production process. One more thing, the gap between output and value added, the sum of that has to be the purchases of inputs, of all other kinds of inputs in your economy. But that's just an accounting thing. When we do input-output analysis, it tells me labor income, it tells me the components of value added, and then I have to attach to it the employment side, because that's not initially part of it. But that's what the value added thing is. Why don't I have any there's no returns to investment per se in a college because it's a public institution and I'm not generating profits? Okay, so I'm just making that the same value as labor income. That's just an accounting thing. Okay, but it's a perfectly good question. College of Human Sciences, here's their student impacts. Again, I've already been through this. Their students, they generate in the region this much output. Their spending is more than this, but the way we translate output, it's less. It supports a number of jobs. There's the supplies. It supports jobs. When those job holders spend their income, it supports induced activity. We sum it all up, and we get the student effect in their regional economy. And again, multipliers. I have double counting in here. Some of this is student employment. Some of this involves housing values. I've got to sort out. So I can sum them together after doing it, and I put them all together, and I've now summed it all together. Let's just go to the bottom line here. That's what we care about. $82 million. What did we start out with? $38 million? We started out with college, but once I counted in the multiplied through effect and student spending, we get up to about $82 million in that diamond of regional economic activity, 1,354 jobs, $43.3 million worth of labor income that's supported by this college in the regional economy. And then I can look at it as a percentage of Iowa State University multiplied all the way through. It explains 6% now of employment, 4.7% of labor income, 4.1% of output. Remember, its original spending was what, 3.8 or 3.3? Whatever. It was smaller. It was smaller. So when it helps us express the value of the college. But then what do I do with this? I need to be careful. What do I do with this? We are part of the university, and our students that we serve are part of the regional economy. We can take a slice of this. We can go back to, and we can talk about this, and we can say, well, how much of this is competitive research? And how much of this is attributable to my foreign students? And let's just pretend it's 15%. Well, if this is the economic contribution, and 15% is the research and foreign student service, then I just take 15% of these totals and say that's that but-for part of it, the economic impact. I've got this big economic contribution, but for the College of Human Sciences attractiveness and competitiveness, I've got an increment of productivity that wouldn't have existed in my economy, but for them. And so we can slice it out of there. Same slice, not for the research dollars, but you could take all of the out-of-state students' percentage, whatever the out-of-state students' percentage is of the total, and you could take that percentage and multiply times these last values here. I'm sorry, I need to be looking at the rows, and say that's the increment to the regional economy, but for our ability to export education beyond our borders. And you could add that up, and that becomes that part of the economic impact side of it as well. Put the two together. So you have your larger economic contribution, but you can slice out that subset that is unique economic activity to your regional economy. How does this college compare? Well, let's look. These are the three that I've done in the last couple of years. We just did College of Human Sciences. I'm not going through, this is just their direct data, just the way that they look. College of Human Sciences. Here's my College of Liberal Arts. Oh man, they get so much money. Look at that. Got all the people. And then College of Veterinarian, they get so much money, but they don't have very many people. And students, they're way different. So we have some variability and differences. On an economic impact side, my College of Veterinary Medicine, they're starting out at an advantage. On the institutional side, they're at a heck of a disadvantage. On the student spending side, they're not even going to pay attention to that. These are the numbers that they're going to really pay attention to. And the ratio between payroll and jobs is also an interesting thing too. Just pay attention to that. But you can see that their contributions to the region, to the university's total, you're going to get very different kinds of values given the kind of college that you're dealing with, given the kind of student that they're serving, given their costs of either per student or annually or whatnot. So the colleges, they give us some variability. I'm not going to put the impact numbers up of all three of these different types, but this is what we might do. I already talked about this. How might we get that economic impact? I've already talked about that. The other things that we might discern. What, again, of those wonderful spillovers, not just of the Iowa State University, but how much more livable is Ames, Iowa, because we have a College of Human Sciences? I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with that. We do have regional quality of life things. Our houses are worth more. We do have lower crime. We do have all kinds of things. I'm going to take two counties in Iowa. Story County has Iowa State University, gem that it is in that floodplain, sitting there. And then Lee County, Iowa, southeast side has this state prison. And we could say, well, you got your money, you can spend your money on education, or you can spend your money on prison. Which one gets more state funding? The prison gets more state funding, right? Prison gets more state funding. Which economy is growing? Well, Iowa State, Ames, Lee County's barely breaking. They're not even breaking even. They're bleeding people. They're bleeding jobs. It's just awful down there. Does it have something to do with those two institutions? Not in Lee County. The state spending has nothing to do with what's going on there. They've got other issues. It's more complicated. An economy is more than just that. What's the second biggest employer industry in Story County? It's besides government. It's manufacturing. We've got a vibrant and dynamic and really valuable manufacturing sector. We've got a lot of things going on in my economy, but we think most of it is due to our college. College is important, but it's not everything. We have faculty entrepreneurship. We have faculty starting businesses all the time. It's all fine and good, but we can't measure it, but we can describe it. You have to be careful with faculty entrepreneurship and making declarations of how many startups are university employees, because there are people out there that will say, why are we underwriting the salary of people who are starting businesses? And why are you telling me that's a good thing? Why aren't these people doing research and teaching? But you get caught up in that economic impact thing and you start talking about the startups. I hate to consult. I hate it. But I was a single parent with 3 daughters and a son. And I had to help them in college. And they got their 4 years degree, but in my case, they were all 5-year degrees. Other student initiatives and contributions. There are so many things, there are so many activities that are a part of student life and existence in a community that add value across more. They raise money, they do volunteer activities, they do charitable things, they organize. They all have value that we can't measure with an economic impact model, and it's dumb to try. It's best to describe what they do. Be better at storytelling instead of using models. Businesses that are in a college town because it is a college town. Yes, indeed, there are certain kinds of things that we see more of in a college town. That's all good. Some of it has to do with the arts. Some of it has to do with entertainment. Some of it has to do with tattoos and tanning. I mean, everybody gets their mix. And again, the lifetime earnings of graduates, we already know that people who graduate from college make more money than people that don't graduate from college. We need to be careful about what the college can claim. Well, the college can describe all of this as part of the quality of life, the value of the institution, the contributions to the regional aura. But it's not an economic impact in the way that we measure it, at least not with precision. At least not with precision. Now, I'm going to hand off to Dean White, and I don't know if we want to do questions after, or we'll do questions after. So I'll hand off to Dean White, and they're going to move over. And you're going to use this, or are you going to?
Yeah, we'll use yours,
okay.
and I'll take your microphone.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay? Can hear okay? Okay, good. All right, well, then, as we billed earlier, David had been working with the college to help us. Can't hear me.
You're pointed down, sweetie.
I thought it didn't sound quite right. Okay. So that sounds a little bit better, doesn't it? So we have been working since last fall in talking to David about how we could do some economic measures of how we contribute to economic vitality in the College of Human Sciences. And as you can see, one of the things that he's done by doing these analyses is it has provided us with some data that I can now use to go to the provost and point out some figures. So in itself, that will be actually quite useful for us to be able to have that, particularly when you compare to at least the other two colleges that you've already done, but also looking at the entire university. So that gives us kind of a basis of some things, numbers that we can use that are going to be helpful. I can't go talk to the legislature about that because they're not going to care how the pie is divided up at Iowa State University, but they're going to be caring more about some of these other factors that we've been talking about. So let me just take you through what our conversation has been over the last few months, and why really, too, at Iowa State we've been particularly interested in this. If we start with where we're getting this conversation from, this is a multi-level conversation at Iowa State, and certainly within Iowa, and probably at your universities too, is, okay, so how do you impact economic vitality in your particular state? And why do we care? Because our Iowa Board of Regents has asked us that question, and therefore we need to provide some kind of an answer. They have included, however, that we can talk about impact as related to, for example, federal funds that have flowed to Iowa State University. So we can use external funding as a marker or a metric as well. The university talks about how we, as Iowa State University, will contribute to economic development. And that is in our strategic plan. That carries forward to the College of Human Sciences strategic plan. It is in our academic or provost unit strategic plan that says we're going to contribute to economic vitality or economic development. And so therefore we obviously have to pay attention to this and determine ways that we're going to be able to measure that are going to be lawful, according to Dave, and also going to be helpful for us. And then at the same time, a couple of things to consider. We've had this conversation at Board of Human Sciences for about 9 months. We've been thinking about this. So it's also something that I know everybody is thinking about across the country. And then maybe just a special kind of point here is that let us remember always that one way we always contribute to economic development is through our extension and outreach. And as land-grant universities, we actually have a leg up in some circumstances because of some of the work that we do there as well. So in our college mission, if you look, this is ours for the College of Human Sciences at Iowa State, all of our phrases can link to economic vitality and economic development. Improve the quality of life for individuals, and in a few minutes I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about that. For individuals, families, schools, and communities, link discovery, science, creativity, and practice, and develop leaders for roles in research, education, business and industry, and health and human services. And all of those mission statements really contribute to economic vitality in a community or in a state. At Iowa State University, we've chosen the broader definition of engagement, and that's through the Carnegie classification. And within our university, within the College of Human Sciences, we have said that we would identify and measure the college's impact on, again, this sounds a lot like our mission, but it's interesting, this really relates back to the Carnegie classification: schools, businesses, industries, and health and human services to the people of Iowa and beyond. And so that conversation is pretty broad, but it's inclusive for how Iowa State thinks about its engagement role through extension and outreach as well. So here I wanted to talk just a little bit more. For the College of Human Sciences, we think about engagement as an economic driver, but from several different standpoints. Often we think about economic development as like building businesses and that kind of thing. And certainly colleges of human sciences, ours and yours alike, do contribute through the development of entrepreneurship. And we also, most of us all have units that really do directly impact retail businesses around the state. So most of us have some kind of outreach or some kinds of programs within the state that you know are going to impact that. But one of the things as colleges of human sciences that we probably want to think a little bit more about is how do we impact community development and organizational development. And we would argue that the colleges of human sciences have a huge impact on economy. We need to know how to tell the story. And the story should include the fact that we are, not only are we contributing to this subject matter ourselves as faculty members, we're producing students who go out and contribute to subject matter that helps in the following different ways. Number one, now we happen to have a college or a school of education in our college, and so many of you do, some of you don't, but what does it do to have people who are studying education and educational policy, and what does it do to have students who are graduating as future teachers? Those teachers are going to go out and improve the educational system and contribute to the economic vitality of the state wherever they go because of the quality of the education that they produce to produce a better community, better education, better community. We're also educating students who are going to go out and assist in social service kinds of activities. They're going to work on improving parental skills, which in turn is going to enhance the value of what the family impact and produce a better family, better interactions, better interpersonal communications, and really just have a more stable family life by some of the work that our students do. You could extend that. We're going to go out and educate professionals who are going to help people learn how to eat better, how to exercise better, and that they should exercise, motivational factors as well. We're going to educate students who are going to go out and be able to create clothing that will be more functional, that will improve quality of life, whether it's functional because you're trying to stay warm because we now have our third polar vortex of the season, or whether you are impacting by improving the military uniforms that might be worn by our military, and making them more functional, making them more effective because of what our graduates are doing when they go out into the field. So what we're doing is, and we could go on about other kinds of activities. Let's take one more example. We're maybe educating the food scientist who goes and impacts the food industry by helping develop foods that are going to be more healthful as well. So what we're doing is creating a broad and wide base of individuals who are going to go out and impact the quality of life. We're impacting the human capital. We're impacting what it is that our humans can go out and do to create to create a base for a community that is going to be a desirable place to live because it has these quality of life impacts because of what our graduates can supply for them, and thus is going to create that thick base for attracting industries to the community because that community has what you want. And so those kinds of factors are things that we need to come up with examples of to be able to show that, yes, indeed, we are going to be able to have a great deal of impact as colleges of human sciences. And all of these are different from the kinds of analyses that David was doing. His were non-subject related. What we need to do is to be able to add the subject-related parts to the numbers that David can give us. And then from that, we can develop some of those little scenarios. And we've had a few examples that have come up. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions because maybe you can fire some more of those hard questions at David. He says he likes to have, or me, well, you're going to have to answer him. He likes to have the complicated questions. They're more fun to answer. But some very specific examples, and I think he's provided maybe a couple of examples here, and I thought the one, I think, Jorge, you were talking about the impact of wellness at the university. And so taking an example and utilizing that example with the calculation of statistics within that example and not trying to extrapolate it back to, and therefore the College of Human Sciences has 350 jobs for every one we produce. No, just the very specific example that is going to work for that situation. But they have to be a little, they have to be eye-catching. So that's, all that will be important. Organizational development, really that is a subcategory that we're using for how do our graduates or how do our faculty members go out and impact nonprofit organizations, communities, schools, community colleges, etc. So that would be a subset of development. And I always want to come back to the human sciences extension and outreach, which is an integral part of what our whole college does. And again, many of you land grants and some of the publics also have that as a mission, that it's important for us to be doing this kind of outreach and output that is going to have an economic impact, because that's partly what land-grant universities do. And so this just continues the land-grant mission to be thinking about economic development in this way. And one thing I did leave out when I was talking about the first part as to why, as a college, we're interested in economic development is that during his inaugural speech, our then new president, Leith, said that Iowa State University will be the university that best serves the people of the state of Iowa. And so our examples that we come up with don't have to be just numbers. They can be true examples of some specific situations that have been occurring and what we have been doing to solve a problem, fix an issue, have an impact. And so it's just that message just keeps needing to come back. And let's see. So we have a sophisticated set of metrics that as a university we're supposed to fill out every year. And one of them, not surprisingly at all, is that we will describe our economic development of how we impact businesses in Iowa. That's a request for university metric. Well, we have 3 academic units, probably similar to what you have, and ours, or 3 units at the university. Ours is the academic unit. And so our academic affairs metric is for this very same economic development, is to measure trend data for unduplicated number of Iowa companies. Is that your input, the unduplicated numbers? Probably. Okay. Provided with technical and business assistance, but our interpretation of how we can supply those kinds of figures and numbers and stories is that we're going to measure trend data, blah, 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 for organizations served by faculty and staff on behalf of the University College Extension and Outreach. So we're looking at our organizations more than just Iowa companies, because that also is a very important measure of our economic development and of the outreach that we are having. So what we're trying to do is to develop a system by which we can collect the data in a routine fashion from the college. You all know, you ask faculty for examples, and you'll get some faculty who are always wanting to give you examples of things they are doing, and then you'll have others who rarely are wanting to provide any input. So what we've been trying to do this year is to set up a systematic way of collecting this kind of data, and we're beginning to institute that this year. Appoint a committee. Isn't that what we always start with? Well, this was a very small targeted committee. And this was just a group of folks to kind of begin to develop what could be a database so that we can get some key progress indicators on economic development. And we tried to make sure everybody understood what the definitions were that we were using. And what we're doing right now is testing the database with a sample of faculty and staff. In fact, we just finished that to get a few examples for you today. And then we're going to try to utilize the annual review process to collect this kind of information. And what we're asking for is that on every department will have this subset in their annual review. And by the way, Extension and Outreach and also the Food Science and Human Nutrition Department had already been doing this for like 20 years, but our other units had not. So this is going to be a systematic way for us to be able to collect this information. This is not quite the way the form looks, but we tried to make it as easy as possible for people to report this kind of information. Yeah, yeah. But it's not been systematic through people who don't have extension and outreach appointments. So this is a way to get at a systematic reporting for people who don't have traditional extension and outreach appointments. We're talking about everybody. So we've kind of broken it down into a form. It doesn't look quite like this, but we just want the location, the organization, whether, for example, this one's Bureau of Nutrition and Health. And then they need to tell us what kind of an organization so we can classify it. Is it a nonprofit? Is it a school? Is it a business, et cetera? And then what kind of development activity are you doing? Remember, I used community, organizational, and business. And so then they just classify it for us. And then we try to get them to describe their interaction. What we've expected is that, well, for example, this one, Bureau of Nutrition and Health, they reported that they plan to provide workshops and help stakeholders improve quality school meals and meet new regulations. Then we have the contact. We probably, if we're going to want some very specific things, we'll probably go back, but at least we'll have an idea of what it is everybody is doing, and we can begin to build that culture of people reporting. And just as an example, these are not well developed because, as I say, these were just due on March 1st. So we tried to incorporate them really fast to give you some examples. We had some examples that came in for local, state, and national economic vitality. And for example, we did have some faculty members who have been working with the Ames Main Street Cultural District doing work related to developing brand identity. They've actually been working with storefronts and doing quite a bit of work. And in this particular year, they presented some information related to their findings, but they've actually been doing that for quite some time. The Mid-Iowa Community Action Association has created education materials as part of a class highlighting information on the WIC program, and this is for businesses in Marshalltown. Now, that'll have an impact on nutrition education, and we may come back and ask for a little bit more information, but those are just a couple of examples. Nationally, the School Nutrition Association, we worked to develop posters to help school food service personnel improve quality and safety of school meals. We also have somebody working on the Achieving the Dream initiative. This is an initiative to enhance the attendance to community colleges of minority students. And so we wanted to be able to capture the type of impact we're having also on furthering education for some of these different populations. International, we did some work in Costa Rica at providing farm food safety training, and also in China, where we actually have a linkage to Wuhan University and to that district. And there we were actually working with practitioners, showing them how the fashion-related universities can help promote the apparel industry in their area. So these are just some examples that you might take any one of these, utilize it to provide some numbers that could be very contained in your number as an example if you were developing some of those impacts. And of course, you all know what's going to make a big impact, what's going to be able to be more impressive to your legislature or to the situation at the time. And so taking and developing that example or an example would be very useful. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and track our baseline development, and then we'll be able to have some data also report to the provost's office, but also we'll utilize that kind of information widely with the college communications so that we can point to some points of pride. We have, as probably all of you do, stakeholders throughout the state of Iowa that we're always trying to send blurbs to, so we'll develop some of them from our database and be able to always be telling them some of the things that we are doing, and then incorporate some of those plans too into a 5-year strategic plan and operational plan. So with that, I think what we'll do is go ahead and move to the broader discussion to see whether you have some additional questions for David or anything specific for me. Or this also, I think, is a chance for some of you maybe to suggest some possibilities, maybe some things that you are doing at your university that the rest of us can use as well. But remember, we have David here now, so let's make sure we take advantage of the fact that he is still with us, and we can carry the conversation on. So, okay? Any questions? I'll take this off and we can share it.
Pam, I really like the additional activities that you're looking at, because those would be really relevant to my university and college also, but how do you put numbers to those? Can you legitimately?
And that's where we want David to talk legitimately.
Okay.
How do you put those
Okay. I'm Tammy. She's gotten to me here. But how many ways can I measure these? How many ways can I measure these numbers? And standard ways that we're used to measuring things. Our universities contribute to the public good. Our universities contribute to the public good in ways that are expected. These are expected in that they enhance human capital, they make smart people, they make people more productive. They do all of the usual suspects. But then we do special projects, and it's like the one gentleman who asked the question about nutrition. And because we do special projects, how do we quantify that? Now, again, we can do return on investment or benefit cost kind of analysis, but do we need to work that hard, or is it better to just tell the story? How many people did we serve? What kind of service did we provide? What are the expected gains? What does research tell us? We don't have to study this. What does research tell us that we're going to gain from these types of things? What's the range of desired or expected outcomes? I don't have to have a number, but I can at least be pointing in the right direction. And I can communicate that more as a story and a success story as opposed to a ledger number. And I'm in favor of those success stories. I keep telling people, be better at storytelling and less at reporting of numbers. I think storytelling is your best skill. I may get the question back, no, nope. I've got to have a ratio, I've got to have a leverage, or I've got to have a return on investment. But my answer is no. We can use a lot better quantitative value. Outcome measures. Who are we helping? How are we helping them? What are the manners in which they're being helped? And why does society value that? Now, that's a lot harder when you get right down to it than just cranking out a phony number. But it's more important, I think.
I'm Jeff McCubbin from Colorado State. And I appreciate your sentiment there, your last comment. Although I have a provost who's a mathematician. And while I've only been at Colorado State 2.5 years, I'm pretty confident that the sentiment has been delivered for years about the value added of human sciences, generally speaking. And then you look at Pam's budget, which looks a lot like mine relative to the number of ways that we bring students into and through the university that doesn't translate into base budget changes. So if I could go back to the beginning conversation, you were talking about what the College of Human Sciences at Iowa State brought in and made some comparisons across other academic units. What of those metrics have been influential at Iowa State to change base budget or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I think Dean White can answer that, but I'm going to tell you, the number that I'm looking at is the number of students served as your foundation. It's so much greater.
3% of the budget.
3% of the budget and 13% of the students.
So those are numbers that matter, but I'm stuck where I am in terms of trying to make an argument that's based upon ratios of some type that can change funding at the college level, because the stories aren't working.
Okay, and I understand, and I can then see why you have this incredible desirability of coming up with a number, a metric that gets either a legislator's or an agency head, but somebody's attention. I'm perfectly happy with you using the right kind of economic impact analysis, the right kind of descriptions, the right kind of package. And you're saying the storytelling doesn't work, and I'm going to say that the phony economic impact analysis has gotten you folks in a terrible place. And so we've got to find a place in between those two. I'm going to argue that it's your job to convey the value of your worth to your legislators, and that's a teaching process. I have this happen to me a lot, where I go to a meeting that's a government meeting, and again, I told you, I have people telling me what I'm supposed to find or how I'm supposed to conclude. Can you imagine going up to an auditor and saying, here's what I want you to find? You know, the point is I have standards, you have standards, we all have standards. My job is to convey the importance of both my language, my findings, and my profession to the decision-making process, and then allow them to use it for the value that they find it. But I can't change the way they think.
I think the storytelling works for legislators,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily translate into higher education funding, nor does it work at my university in internal reallocation for where the students are.
Right, and I'm going to just offer one last thing. Given what's happened to university funding over the last 15 years, nothing works. Period. You know, what is that old joke? University of Michigan used to be a state-funded university. Now it's a university with a state name. And, you know, it's kind of the way it works out in some of the places.
Rod Runyon from Texas State University, and Pam's, one of her examples was the downtown study, community study with brand identity. And Dave, earlier you talked about not going out and trying to find different ratios, et cetera. There are data in the empirical data in our journals, and I think an example of this where you can combine the storytelling with actual empirical data, and Linda would probably know this, I have a couple of different publications talking about the effect of a cogent or a formal and cohesive brand identity for downtown shopping districts and how important it is, and it's more important than any other thing in terms, including historic preservation. Hope nobody around here is going to throw anything at me. And we then replicated that study with local community residents and asked them what are the things that drives them downtown, and it's brand identity. And so here, Linda would be able to take that study, say, here's some empirical research that has shown that it's important for downtown shopping districts to have a brand identity, and therefore we're working with them on that, and we would expect that there would be value to them coming in the future.
Yeah, I'm going to hand off, but so how do you measure that? You got increased sales, you get profitability, you got foot traffic, you have all of the things. You might even
vacancies.
Right, you might have rents going up. There are all kinds of economic measures. You can put some of that into an impact model, but what you just described is good enough.
Right.
Is good
Right.
enough. Do you have anything? Yeah.
Well, I mean, really just kind of reiterating what both of you have said, that's the point, to take some of those examples and within the laws of economics do some type of an analysis that would be very appropriate and show some kind of value based on the kind of work that is done there. You know, another one there was that Linda happened to get a $500,000 USDA grant to work on that as well. So there was another impact of economy coming into the College of Human Sciences in Iowa State because it was external money. It was external to the state, so we can count it, right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Steve.
Again, Steve Jorgensen, University of Missouri College of Human and Environmental Sciences, and we talked earlier about wellness programs and what potential impact that might have. And it's my understanding there is a body of literature that documents the economic impact on organizations, corporations, and universities of having an internal wellness program. And so we're working toward that on our campus. But what I want to say is in our college, so to date, and Jeff, our stories haven't worked very well either, but we keep trying, and we will. The one area within our college that I can document with dollars that we have an economic impact is our volunteer income tax assistance program through personal financial planning, academic unit, and human sciences extension. We call it MOTAX, where we prepare income tax returns for low-income families and individuals earning $50,000 or less who might not otherwise file an income tax return. We know that we save them over $500,000 a year documented in income tax preparation fees. Our students do this. They're IRS trained to prepare these income tax returns in our building and other extension outlets. We bring in over $2.5 million of federal income tax refunds every year into mid-Missouri. And we serve probably, Joe, is it 2,500 families? Is it more? 1,800 on our campus and then 2,500 others around the state. So I've got numbers. Where I don't with, we teach early childhood education, and that's going to save money down the road in imprisonment and drug abuse and alcohol and substance abuse. But with the MOTAX program, that's the one thing I've got I can put dollars and cents on. Now, we might argue about the economic multiplier, and our department chair uses 2.5. I think we probably need to back that down, but that's something that we have been able to get our hands around compared to other things that's really hard to put a value on, a dollar value.
That's a really excellent example. And again, taking one, I would imagine for a number of those too, for some people will get used to reporting here as to what the value is, but there can be an economic impact. But for example, there would be some literature perhaps available in the impact of early childhood education. And I'd look at Carla to help us find it at Iowa State, that would show that there could be, studies show this impact. Not we did it, but some research study has shown that this would be the case. And I would think using some of our own literature to be able to back this up and come up with some facts and figures would be very helpful. Cornell has done it as well.
Exactly. I think that's a key point. We think that in our outreach and engagement programs, we start with some kind of a theory of change at the beginning, right? I mean, not reconstructing the logic at the tail end, to show that there is an impact, but I think that's one of the keys. And I'm glad that, you got to the story piece, because one of the pieces, that we certainly have to do, I worked on the Carnegie outreach and engagement classification for us, and one of the questions, obviously, is how many organizations, are you engaged with in some fashion? The CEF accreditation asks how many organizations do you have an MOU or some kind of formal understanding with. But I think the one thing we have to remember is those numbers in its own right are measures of outputs, and those are not outcomes at that particular point in time. We have to do that translation, as you talked about, through the stories. But as was said earlier, we do have a body of knowledge. We believe that the work that we do is, in fact, based on some kind of theory of change, that our outputs are, in fact, going to lead someplace. And we ought to know on the front end what it is that we're shooting for rather than on the back end. So I think using what we know in terms of a chain of events, logic, one thing leading to another, that's how we can move some of these things, not all of them, but some of them, to monetize benefits and that kind of stuff that naturally lead themselves to that.
I might add the value of the stories in for us to be able to do them and do them well cannot be understated. I was just thinking, I know all of you have some type of regular publication that you put out from your college. We recently put one out about internships. And actually part of the reason for us to put it out was because we are trying to increase the number of internships that are paid. And so we were offering employers up the opportunity, to come back to Iowa State, to your alma mater, to offer a paid internship, but also collect an amount of money through our foundation that could be utilized to assist students who have to do an internship where they don't get paid, so that they could have some kind of a fund that they could apply for. And we got, not all monetary responses, but we got a huge number of positive responses about the stories that were there. I mean, the people loved the human impact of reading about those stories. So if we can do that in combination with throwing in, whenever we possibly can, some figures that make sense, that would be very helpful.
Real quick, I'm going to just add something. These are great examples. I'm back to this thing that we do in extension. That we're working with an extension called What's Our Public Value, What's Our Public Worth? So what do we contribute to a community? Well, we improve productivity. Okay, that's all great and fine and good. In the case of the income tax, we eliminated an information barrier or some sort of performance behavior thing and allowed people to access resources and get earned income tax credit or tax returns or whatnot. But what we did was we improved the welfare. Well, that's called a welfare gain, and in the case of the multiplier, the way we do that is we say, well, what did society do to make this happen? Society dedicated some student resources on the cost side, and it resulted in a well-being impact on the household side. And you measure those two things, that's a benefit-cost ratio that's positive. That says up to some level, we should not just keep doing this, we should do more of this. Because I don't know how many you said you serve, but I know there's there's thousands of people who could benefit from something like that. And society benefits if we can do that. You don't put it into a multiplier. You put it into a benefit cost analysis that says, if we do this smart and we expand this program in increments and we reach people who really need to be reached, maybe down in the boot hill or someplace like that, and we have this continuing impact. And what we say then is society is better off as a consequence of what we did by both a numerical value as well as a well-being value. You don't crank it through an impact study. You do it with a different tool. But that other tool is really hard to do, and economists like me whine when you ask us to do it. And we say, you got to give me a lot of money because it's hard to measure. And so it's easier to do a bad tool than use a good tool.
Thank you, Dave and Pam. And as a member of outgoing board members, and last year we talked about strategic priorities, one of which is how do we position Board of Human Science as an economic driver. And so this is sort of step one. We have to understand what really economic impact, or how do you even talk about this in economic language. So this was first step. So I'm really happy to have a lot of dialogues with members. That's wonderful. But I've got two questions, whether I've been doing this right or wrong. I haven't used economic impact like the way you told not to, so that's good. But since we talked about this economic driver, I went back home and thinking, how am I going to position our School of Human Ecology in the context of economic space without going through all these multipliers? So I decided that, okay, our students in retailing program, and many of you have retailing program, people are like, well, retailing, why do you even have retailing program? Why not business school, right? I'm sort of tired of explaining that. So I decided that, our mission is to really develop leaders in the field of retailing. By the way, retailing industry is a $1.2 trillion national economy. It's an economic driver. Am I wrong on that?
Oh, you're right.
Yes. So on that note, and it may not be accurate, I actually looked at the labor the statistics and calculated there are about like occupation categories of like several hundreds. And actually we carefully, with the grad students, looked at areas our students are typically going, whether human science or retailing and design area, and decided that, okay, this accounts for almost $65 billion industry in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So I'm just telling a legislator, our program actually produces students who go to work here, not just work, create a job in this industry. It's a $65 billion industry. Oh, really? Am I wrong or right?
Yeah. Okay.
It's a little bit
So,
stretched.
no, it's all
I'm
the
not
truth.
lying, right,
It's
yeah.
all the truth,
Right, yeah.
and it's all the truth. Okay. You've heard this statement. You'll hear somebody get up every time the new economic numbers come out and they announce the GDP, and then somebody somberly says, you know that household consumption is 70% of GDP. And then I always respond, was like, no kidding, that's why we make stuff, you know. It's for us to consume it. Our economy is driven by you and me buying from one another consumption. In and of itself, one of the very significant elements of consumption is the ability to convey goods through the retail system. We depend on that. It's part of that internal working of our economy. Is there an economic impact to retail? Well, yes, it's part of, it's intrinsic to, and it's necessary to our economy. A fully functioning retail system, a system that's efficient, that's got good leadership, that is profitable. All of those things are all great for our economy. Are you contributing in part to a $65 billion industry? Yes, you are. Do you explain that $65 billion industry? No, you do not. So you get to, it's sort of, we have economic impact by affiliation, but my contribution, your X1 with regard to that Y retail dollar is it's got lots of other stuff going
Right.
on.
I think that my strategy was not so much of economic impact, but explaining our sector in a different way that people
Then they're
understand.
used,
Right.
then they're used to,
So-
and I think that's all. I think
And
that's all.
again, so
important.
by tweaking a little bit, all of a sudden people realize, wow, that's not an insignificant sector that you're serving.
Yeah.
And so that's one.
And if they all think that the retail multiplier is 7, it works for you really well.
So economic impact, actually, I didn't say economic impact studies, but I used twice last couple of weeks, 2 weeks actually, and in this context, and I'm going to hear from you whether it's right or wrong, because you mentioned several times about, we're supposed to do what we're supposed to be doing, and so, students graduate and get a job, we create economy and all that, entrepreneurship and all that. Yes, we're expected, but not all schools do the same degree, or some maybe even going minus. I mean, you get the tuition, but you don't produce enough.
Right.
But anyway, so here's how I used it. And I was, 1 week I was in West Coast, the Stanford area, and Silicon Valley, and Google campus, and visiting. I couldn't believe economic activity there, and I can't help but to think this economy there that's happening without Stanford and Berkeley, this would not have existed. Then I went to the East Coast and Cambridge area, biotech industry just booming there.
Yes.
And it's like, again, without all these universities there, and they would not exist, the economy would not exist. So I told my colleague, wow, economic impact of these universities, I wonder if people notice. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're right, but we do not have that many really distinct educational clusters like those two. We have Research Triangle Park, we have up there, and we have places that are truly education clusters like that. That density of educational institutions that exist either in the Stanford area or in the Boston area is really unique. It's different at Iowa State University. We don't have that kind of cluster there. But that matters. What you've got is this cluster, we call it a localization agglomeration, but it's one of those things is that they get economies of scale because they interact with one another. And they're like great big overflowing buckets of knowledge that spill out. And there's all kinds of stuff that leaks out of the private sector that actually creates value in the university. University says, look what we've created. Well, it's because the private sector was doing things, they gave them the hints. And then it works the other way. And so you have this lateral flow of information, and it's a dynamic system. It works in part in some places, it works well in other places, but not all places have that kind of vibrancy, that kind of vibrancy. But it's valuable.
But having said that, I know U of I, anyone from U of I? I think they got a $70-some million from Obama administration for manufacturing initiative. But that is a regional economy with, I'm not sure Purdue is part of it, but I know Wisconsin is part of it. So obviously, it may not be clustered that way, but can we be, as human science, can we be clustered regionally? Can we talk about that?
Yeah, you can, and to the degree to which you're either part of the research side of that, part of staffing the necessary human capital, part of that. Yeah, to the degree that you're a participant in it, just don't overstate it, you know. It's like, again, I got to tell a story. You know, 1981, I was a graduate student at the University of Iowa, and I'm sitting there drinking a beer with Jane Smiley. You know, and maybe I gave her the idea because I told her I grew up on a horse ranch. I don't know, but anyway, maybe it was me. Maybe it was me. No.
I think we had one more question. Tammy looked like she was.
Tammy wants to talk.
Tammy wants to talk.
All right. So I was watching your presentation. You use expenditure.
Yeah.
You start out with expenditure. So I was thinking about if I were a legislator, as a matter of fact, being asked by a legislator and said, why are we public, land-grant university, why do we give you money, that expenditure component? If you look at the expenditure, someone can say, I forgot the number, there's a huge number there. Really, I don't know about Iowa State University, I can only use our university. The state using tax dollar is about a third or less, okay? The other one was composite. For you to be able to spend that money, you have to come from student tuition. For generating other job has to have the faculty go external funding, go from the government. So you come up with a ratio. Actually, right now, for Oregon State University, we can only claim 20% of our total expenditure that actually come from the state, give the state dollar appropriation, okay? So I'm just thinking about that. Sure, if you said economic, just the one, everything that come from that big expenditure, then you only go through local, direct, indirect, and then, that's 1 point, whatever the number, you multiply it. But the fact is, if you start out with, not expenditure, but start out with the number from the income tax, from the payer's dollar, that is huge. But I know if I say economic impact, you'll kill me because discipline is not going to go there. So is there another number that we actually can tell the legislator, not a number, we can say something. I was just thinking about, can we use economic vitality? I don't know anybody understand that. Or economic something, because they're the one asked the question. It's not, we can tell story until the cows come home. But the reason we ask you here is human sciences face lots of time, either don't get our share of a dollar, or the land-grant university does not get a state appropriation because they think K-12 is more important. Maybe it is. But the fact is we need something. That's what I was telling you about this pyramid method. Give me something I can draw attention to someone to think that is important. Then I can tell another layer of a story, another layer of story until the cows come home.
Yeah.
But something is effective.
Yeah.
And can economists help to develop something, the language, that you can stomach it, but we can use it?
No, okay, you want this ratio, and I saw people nodding their head. But remember, the lower the state spending and the higher the tuition payments coming out of households, the better that ratio works. We work ourselves into a trap with that number. Where does the money come from? Who bears the burden? All of that's important. I don't know what to do with that. In an era when this state's funding has been going down and down and down, and the household tuition payments have been going up and up and up, and to say, well, geez, look how well we're leveraging money out of households. It's not quite the way that I want to measure that. I don't know. I can't do your pyramid, and I don't think economists can. The world has not been served well by talking to economists very long. You need to talk to them a little bit, but then you need to talk to other people. And in my case, maybe it's a negotiation that has to happen. I'm not a tyrant or a wordsmith. I just want you to not get caught looking silly, and that's what matters to me. Oh, you got another. We're gonna wrap up.
May I have just one question follow up with Pam? Pam, I noticed noticed that you have your faculty really put it on economic vitality using the local organization. I can just think about if I ask my faculty, they're going to say, you mean which part of my job you want me to quit? You mean you want me to do one more thing? So how did you convince your faculty saying that you need to put this one, you need to do more, or you just have to put it there?
Well, we try very hard to have everybody understand. Not everybody's going to contribute, but what they're doing to have it integrate as much as possible with their current teaching and research activities, and try to not do brand new stuff. This is an outgrowth of something they're already doing, and we always are trying to do that. Okay, we probably better bring this to a close. Join me in thanking David for coming here to contribute to our conversation. I think Chris is going to give us some instructions.
All right, and if our virtual watchers and listeners are still with us, we're so glad that you could join us. Thanks very much. All right, 5 o'clock, for those of you going to the Smith-Lever celebration at the Rayburn Building, we've agreed we'll meet at 5 o'clock in the lobby, and for those of you that know the Metro and want to do that, fine. Most of us, I think, will be sharing taxis, so we'll find each other 5 o'clock in the lobby. Jorge has suggested that we take our name tags with us, because that way you can identify yourself and your university. I think it's a really good idea. So again, we'll see some of you at 5 o'clock in the lobby.